Hello, welcome first.
Hi. Thanks for having me. And yeah, no, it'd be good to have a chat with everyone. And yeah, like Chai says, we're very friendly or relatively friendly. So feel free to ask any questions, any burning questions as well. So yeah, we're gonna talk to you all about why. And I'll start with that question: why are we here? So you're all in a place where you're about to go from things that are expected to a lot of unexpected. And it's going to be a lot of things that are going to be happening when you leave school. And we want to help navigate because when I was in your position, when Sarah was in your position, it always helped getting that advice from people who had been through certain things. And I think with a lot of what we're going to be talking about, we hope that it helps you navigate the next phase of your lives, your careers. So I will start by talking a bit about myself and the relatively squiggly road that I've been through to get to where I am today. So I started doing engineering. Well, actually, I didn't start doing engineering. I started doing drawing when I was younger in a lot of your positions. But I went down an engineering path and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I felt that I was interested in technology and people around me said that was a sort of good path to go down. So I went down that path, only to find myself later down in life when I was in or after university and in industry, deciding that actually I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, and took a big U-turn back to drawing in a way. So I left a job as an engineer and went and started my own business in a creative industry called Mayamada. And we make comics. We'll talk more about sort of what we do, work across games. But I went from the expected path to a very unexpected path, and being able to navigate that has taught me a lot of things that hopefully we can squeeze into this. So I've gone from engineering to working in comics, working in video games, working a lot with young people, and almost everything I'm doing now is very unexpected. So, like I said, we're gonna pull out some lessons to share with you, and then yeah, see where we get to. But someone who also lives in the unexpected side of the world is Sarah. So I'll let Sarah introduce herself and talk a bit about her journey.
So thanks so much, Nigel. Where Nigel went from expected to unexpected, I went from unexpected to unexpected. And the reason I think that's so important for all of you right now is as we look forward, the number of careers all of you might go through are many and varied. And the people we meet, the young people we meet, those that understand what really makes them tick are able to flex, are able to do things that really excite them. They don't get trapped and then they don't get stuck in things. And I would say you're at the ideal point in your lives to really explore and be curious and work out what it is that you want to do. Where I started was probably not doing quite as well at school as was expected. So that was unexpected. And then I thought, do you know what? I was at a period where people did other things. So I went and worked both in a tin can factory. I know I can tell you all about the inside of a tin can. I worked in a car factory, filing all the paperwork at Renault. I went into architecture and I worked with architects. And then I went and worked in TV and media. And I went into Channel 4 where I squirreled away and found a way through to find out all about the industry, everything I could, and ended up at Channel 4 as a commissioner, commissioning programs across the board. They were light entertainment. They were, at the beginning, it was a really impactful place where we made changes to, we invited people in and changed society by making programs that everybody watched, opposed to just a few. And I worked on big entertainment shows with lots of people that are around. And when I left, I trained as a coach because I'd had lots of people coming up. I also worked with people both creatively as well as how could they step forward? How could they get that confidence to do what they really wanted to do? How do they take a step sideways to do something else? It's taken me to incredibly unexpected places. I've worked in China, India, the Middle East. I set up a TV channel in the Middle East, and I'm about to go off to America. I'm telling you that story because I never thought in a million years, when I sat where you're all sitting, there was a point where I was sitting in India as the sun set over the Bay of Bengal with a group of people on a very packed beach, being told stories, and I was being paid for it, which was just amazing. I would never have thought that role existed, or I would have got there. And I use that as an example of what I have always wanted to do is work with people. And I've always wanted to see people succeed and step up and help them tell their stories. So that's why I do what I do. And it's why it's led us to both being here today, because Nigel and I both work, or we're both part of the Children's Media Conference advisory board, where we step up and try and affect how the media affects every young person in the country through doing that. What we'd wanted to do today was just talk through a bit more around how you can do it and why it's really important. Now, this isn't about your career. I'm going to keep drilling that in. It can be if you want it to be, but it's about how do you get through things? How do you make a difference? I had one client who, she was in the Olympics when she was 13. She was very young. She was in South America, and she had to, as she said, learn how to control the controllables. And she was certainly one of the first people in COVID to start putting videos out, because we realized that was her reason for being, is that she'd learned how to control things through her sport. So this isn't all about academics. The two things collide, but all of you will have something within you that can help you get nearer what you want to do and not be defined by things that you have put around you. There's somebody, and I think Charlie can put up the slide, called Simon Sinek, and he's a very well-known author. The first book he wrote was Start With Why, and he's done a TED talk. He's done lots of talks about this topic, and I think Charlie has some resources she can send out with links, but anything on Simon Sinek is always good. He's very approachable, very easy, but he was observing people, and he came up with, and if we come up with the next slide, the golden circle. And the golden circle puts why at the center of everything, whether it's a big corporate or whether it's an individual. If you know who you are and why you're doing things and why you are as you are, you can then work out how and what. And some of you will be at that point where you're choosing topics. Nigel's explained some of his path, and in a minute we'll dig into his why. But if you put why at the center, and then you look at how you get to that why, and then you do what it is that you've got to do. So Simon talks through, and if you look at his talks, he talks through companies like Apple. When they invented the iPod, they were doing it against Sony, who'd got this huge, great Walkman. You know, probably none of you have got Walkmans, but at the time, Walkmans were huge. People were carrying them around. They were massive, and they were, to a certain extent, you know, it was a real status symbol to have this big thing. They sold them on the number of gigahertz that they had and how much power they had. Everything was about the power. And Apple went in and said, no. What we need to talk about is 1,000 songs in your pocket. And they created this little thing that was tiny, went in your hand. And for all of you, you're going, yeah, we've got phones. At that time, nothing like that existed. It was just amazing. But what they did was sit there and work out who the customer was and what they needed to do. Then they went, how do we give the customer the same as that other device, but in a way that's easier to use? So what do we need to do to give them the how we give it to them, the small device? What is it we need to do? We need to devise the tech. But what they've done as Apple whether you like Apple or not, is they always keep the customer service and the customer at the center of what they're developing, at the center of their whole customer service. Everything bleeds through back to the customer. Now, what's that got to do with all of you? I hear you all say. That's just a metaphor for how people do things. And I was doing a talk live like this to a group of students in a school in London, and two of them had come up to the front and they looked a bit dejected as they came in, and they were doing this why exercise and they were looking a little lost. So I went over and I said, "What's the problem?" And they went, "Well, we haven't got a why. You know, everybody, other people in the room know what they want to do. They know what they want to be. We haven't got one." So I had a chat with them, and it turned out they loved music and they loved poetry. One loved music, one loved poetry, you know, which was a surprise. They, you know, I wouldn't have put them there, but they did. And I just said, "You're talking to the wrong person there, because there are all these different careers you could have within my world that people would absolutely love you to do that." So that became their why and the exercise they did. So I'm going to, in a minute, ask you all to look at your why, but to do that, I'm going to talk with Nigel, and we're going to go through the exercise of how you can do this so that you've got something to work off. And we're going to just look at his why, his sort of non-corporate why, and how he's got to where he is and how his why has driven him. So Nigel, your why, what would you say your central why is that's been with you?
So it's interesting because it's something that came to me when I look back at what I'd been doing. So for people listening, it's not necessarily something that you can't move forward without. Sometimes it just comes to you. And for me, when I looked at what I was doing, it's a case of storytelling. And for me, it's about using storytelling to develop creativity in others. And that's something that when I look back at the different things that I was doing, it became a bit more apparent. So like I said, when I started, it was me drawing characters and stories before going down a different educational path, a more technical one, and then sort of in a way coming off the technical path, or at the time I felt I was coming off the technical path. I actually wasn't, but at the time it felt like that, to something a bit more obviously creative and story driven. And over the sort of more recent years, it's about using the different means, the different mediums to tell stories in the hopes of developing creativity in others. So it's something that I've kind of realized I've been moving towards.
And so what would you put at that center? What word, what emotion would you put in the center of your circle that's taking you through?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things I'm always mindful of doing is how to empower others. And we do a bunch of different things. So that central why kind of comes out in different ways. So we literally tell stories. So we have our own manga universe of characters. I write stories. I don't draw now. I lost that skill. So a little tip, if you don't use the skill, you will lose it. But yeah, so we literally have our own universe of characters. But then we also deliver workshops. We work a lot in schools and colleges, youth hubs, about how to create stories and get people to tell their own stories through their own characters. We have a podcast where we talk to people who make stories about their story, like their journey, about how they made it to where they are now. So it's about that word empowerment. So we're not necessarily teaching anyone literally how to make a story, but we are trying to find out what is the story within each person and how they can bring it out and empower them to kind of go on their own journey.
And if we go back just a few years to where you did that transition out of engineering, did you have that somewhere lurking within you at that transition point?
I'm going to say yes for the purposes of this talk, but honestly, no. I started this with a group of friends who aren't involved anymore, but we all had an interest in Japanese culture. So I've been to Japan. We liked the idea of starting a business, and we thought it was way easier to start a business than it actually is. So with that motivation, we went and started this business. And yeah, honestly, there wasn't much of a plan. And I always tell people this, like, I can't stress that enough. It was more of a feeling that we could do this thing. And there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of failure and a lot of having to sort of rework things and figure out like this isn't working. I remember in the early days, like when we very first time we started, we actually didn't have comics. So the idea wasn't around comics. It was just around it was actually around fashion. And then we quickly realized I don't actually care about fashion. But I remember meeting this graphic designer, and because we were looking for someone to do the designs, and we had this name, Mayamada. And I remember she told us, like, the name sounds cool, but I don't get anything else that you're doing. So we had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out, like, what do we like doing? So by that point, our initial group of 5 had come down to 2. So me and my friend Lau, and we thought, what do we like doing? We both like telling stories. We both like this idea of creativity. So we went on that, and then we had the idea for like characters for this universe. We went and found an illustrator, and then we made our first comic, and then kind of figured out the rest along the way.
So something I often say, and somebody called Marie Forleo has talked about, is everything's figure outable. And while you didn't know about the golden circle or coming up with your why, which is something, again, I think you and I both want to say to everybody on the call, some people might know it. You don't need to really know it long term, but to know what your why is to motivate you, to get you up, to make you curious. And it sounds to me as if when you were going through that transition, you realized you didn't want to be engineering for a long time. You had a group of people around, you explored and got curious in order to get to your why. The others drifted off because there was a clear why that wasn't theirs. And then you were there and you had your how, which was, we need a business, we need to do something. So then it was, now the what is something that you can change. The what is something that if it doesn't work out and the what doesn't quite work, but if you start just with the what, like your friends did, oh, we'll just do a business. They were in the what and the how, but their why was really there. So for people on this call, you might go, what I want to work with people. Well, if you want to work with people, there are so many different paths and avenues you can go down, but it's making sure you stay in the people path rather than going necessarily into something that doesn't allow you interaction with people on a day-to-day basis. You might be the other way around. I work with both sets of people that don't want to be actively at the front with lots of people, and I work with people that have a lot of people around them and quite often want to quieten it down. So I'd like to just say to everybody, have a think and ask any questions about your why. It might be, I'm fascinated by tech. And if you look at the big tech people, they've gone absolutely laser into their tech. And then actually the how and the what means they've got to go out and they're changing the world. They're doing things around that. Equally, if you look at people and you think, I really want to work with people, what are the avenues? Go and explore. You're probably at the stage where you need to go and talk to people that are doing things that you're curious about. And something else that I wanted to add in there, I've got quite a few people that I've had to say, go and play with your drawing, because you mentioned you've stopped drawing. And a lot of people, as they get older, stop doing the thing that really helped them be themselves, express themselves creatively. And the conclusion when they've gone and played is that isn't necessarily what I want to do for my living. Some of them will say, I want my music, my whatever, I don't want to be told what to do. It's up to you. You can work out whether you want it to be your living or not by looking at, why do I love doing this? How would that look? What would I need to do to get there? And something else, I quite often do this talk in the summer to schools, well, you're not about to go into a round of exams and things like that. Okay, if you think you've got the summer holidays ahead of you, and you sort of think about your why, and then you've got the whole summer, and you've got now up until the summer to go and explore and talk to people, to reach out, to get network. Lots of people we work with might want to make a film. Go make one. Like, there's nothing stopping you, and it's figuring out what in your head is stopping you, going and finding out and talking to people, because the more you can get experience, the more likely you are to get nearer to what you want to do and to choose the right combination of things.
Yeah, I think like that idea of going out and doing things is really important, because that's ultimately what we did. Even though what we did at the beginning didn't work out, we went out and we did something, and we met people who gave us advice and pointed us in the right direction. And I think it's that like mindset. So for the people on this call, very much at the beginning part, it is about like starting something and being, I'd say, like being comfortable with the concept of failure. So like I look back and think about how many times we failed, but they were all learning experiences. And I think sometimes you can have the sort of the mindset that it's either success or it's failure. And what I've learned is that actually they're all on the same path. Like you can't get to success without going through failure, because failure is how you learn. So I think about the first, like I said, when we started, it was about like fashion. It's all about t-shirts, and we still do some things here, but it was a different kind of look. And I look back at what we did at the very first instance, and it wasn't good. You'll have to take my word for it, because you'll never see it. They were not good. No one was going to pay for what we were making, and they didn't. And no one, very few people bought what we were doing. But it took us a step further. And then we kind of, like I said, we met someone who gave us some advice. So then we realized that actually we should not be doing any of the artwork. We need to find someone. If we have this idea for doing comics and stories, we need to find someone to do that, the artwork. So we went to Comic-Con and we found an illustrator, and then now our work looks good, and now people do pay for our work. So it is about understanding that what you don't want to do is try and avoid failure, because if you do that, you won't do anything. It's about the right kind of failure, the ones that you can learn from and hopefully not repeat over and over again, but that can take you to the next step. And then in that process, you'll get closer to the thing. You'll get better, for one, and you'll get closer to the thing that you ultimately are good at, because everyone has that ability, has that why, and you'll find that you might have it now, you might know what it is, you might not, but either way, if you think about the things that you can do that you might take for granted, that other people might tell you like, oh, how do you do that thing? Or a lot of people say to me like, oh, how do you do the talks? Because I can't do that. But it's something that maybe you can take for granted. But if you think about it, if you sit and think about it, you might find those things that you can do that will bring you closer to that why and that ability to make something from it.
I think in coaching, people say there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And I think what you were just describing was with the t-shirts. You could have gone, right, that's it, t-shirts out the window. But
it did go out the window, literally. We see they weren't good.
You carried on, and I think that's something that everybody's been through quite a lot over the last few years. So the pattern has shifted, and the backup for working out how to plough forward has changed, because we've been virtual for a couple of years. People are harder to get to because everybody's harder to get to, etc., etc. But for those people that try, do you know what? I see so many people reaching out and finding me, whatever it might be, that gets them closer to where they want to gets them the information, gets them the right path. So it is around working out, and whatever it is you decide you want to do. I normally have another slide. I should have brought it. Stepping stones. Yeah, everything that you'll be doing is a stepping stone. And if you follow something that's firing you up, that stepping stone is in the right direction. Nigel went and did engineering. That has allowed him to do lots of talks about AI, etc. Nigel's got many strings to his bow, and nothing goes to waste. You can always feed everything back into your why. You might want to go into a caring profession, which is just amazing to be able to learn how to talk to people and how to make people's lives different. Again, amazing. And whatever you're doing, you can add into society at whatever level you can be at. And I'm sure all of you, one of the best testing points is shopkeepers and going in and talking to them. If they have a sunny disposition and they're lovely to get on with, your whole day is different. So you can affect things. And if you're doing something like that, knowing your why, which is getting customers to know, like, and trust you, to want to come back to your till. How do you do that? You do that by smiling at them. So what are you going to do? Yeah, my mother went in and said, everybody's queuing for this one lady because she's just so lovely when you get to the front. and she brightens your day as she puts your beans in the trolley. So I know that might seem out there, but we've got lots of people here, some of whom will be having one view of their career and others who'll be thinking, how do I do something meaningful from where I am now? How can I do something that will make me feel good and I want to be doing in the future? And a lot of you at the moment may have to do things, maybe a point where you've got to do things that earn you some money. But you can do those. There's always a lens you can put on whatever it is you're doing that will get you closer to where you want to be, even if you can't get there immediately. So I think one of the things we were saying also when you're talking to people is don't judge a book by its cover, that you might be frightened to go and approach people. You might think, I can't. And often those are the places that you can. So what else would you add to that, Nigel?
I think once you've had a think about the thing that fires you up, the thing that you are good at, the thing that you're passionate about, like you say, is finding those people who can help with that or can help you in your goals. So for me, one of the things that I found on my journey is knowing what I am good at and what we do as an individual, as a brand, has allowed me to help other people in certain ways. So for example, like I said, we talk to a lot of young people, and in some cases we have young people work with us. So we've got a team of like creators, we've got our illustrator, we do events, we've got an event team. And recently we had some young people work on an upcoming manga that we're about to be working on. And this was something that was really cool project. I mean, we're still very much in the early stages, but so far, because we just did the front cover for the manga. And I was saying to Sarah earlier that it's a really good one for me because we had young people input on the design of the cover, on the logo, on the story as well. And it's been something that's been very much a team effort, but it's all a collection of people who have in some way found the thing that they are good at. And what you find is once you narrow in on your why and what you bring, you'll find that there's some things that you don't do. So like I said, I don't draw, but knowing what we do in terms of being able to use storytelling, we find the people that can draw and that want to input on the story, and you'll find your people essentially. So yeah, it can put you in some really interesting places. So I say, yeah, once you have that idea, go out and talk to people, and once you're clear on what your why is, what you're bringing, you'll find the people that you work with, and then you can make something from it.
So I think Charlie's going to come in and feed us some questions in a minute. So we'll end this bit and bring Charlie in with a quote from Christopher Reeves, who's the original Superman. And he had a really bad accident, but the big quotes that you'll find anywhere on the internet is, once you choose hope, anything is possible. And in a way, that's the why. Your hope is that central why. And then once you know you've chosen it, you can move closer in and make it happen. So Charlie.
Thank you. It was definitely interesting. And I love Simon Sinek, and I love the Golden Circle. I think it's a really good tool and a different way of thinking that sometimes we can struggle with because we're used to doing the same thing again and again. So Yeah, loved it. And I'll kick straight off with a couple of questions then. And I think this is a nice warm-up question. So it's come in from Trafford College from the Altrincham site. And they have asked, how did you decide the name of your companies? So, where did the Creative Garden come from? And then Mayamada as well, where did that come from?
So the Creative Garden is a really good why question, because when I was trying to think, what do I call myself? To be honest, somebody said, don't call yourself by your name because you'll never sell yourself, Sarah. Because I was always busy talking about other people and pushing other people. And so they said, go around and talk about what you do, what you love, what it is that you're going to be doing. And I was in a garden, and I thought I could do Media Guardian, but it sounded too much like Media Garden. So I came up with the Creative Garden. And I also own the Talent Garden and the Strategy Garden. But it was all about nurturing. So my key thing in the middle, my why, is about nurturing people.
So yeah, I think that's a good example of like sort of thinking and using your why to inform the name. I'm going to give you the complete opposite example because ours was a complete reverse engineer job. So like I said, when we started, we had this idea with our group that we wanted to do something that sounded Japanese because we like the Japanese culture and we wanted to put that out there. So we made up a name, Mayamada, and then we went and got the domain and everything. And then when we had to pivot and change to like storytelling, we kind of reverse engineered what the name meant. So we had this idea to create this universe of stories, and the universe would be a television network. So each of the comics that we make would tell the story of a different show on the network. So that allowed us to come up with different ideas, but it would still all hang together in a brand. So we did that. And then we had this character who would be the creator of the universe within the universe. So it's all very meta. But his name is Miyazuki Yamada. And he's like this little squirrel with big ideas. So, and all our characters are animals, by the way, if I haven't said that already. So yeah, then this character, Miyazuki Yamada, Mayamada became a mashup of his name. So Miyazuki Yamada, Mayamada. So complete reverse engineer, but it worked out and it's an interesting story to tell.
I like it. Two very different ways and both so successful. So it's great to kind of see the difference between them, I think. Our next question then comes in from Sharon, and they have asked, is imagination the most important thing that we need?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. I'd say from where I sit, it's confidence. Because imagination can really help you think out of the box, so you're not thinking what other people have thought before you, because life is changing so fast. And I think imagination about working out how to get round any blocks and not taking other people's no as an absolute no. I think also curiosity, that's something else I would say, curiosity and confidence. And it's the confidence within yourself. You don't have to be loud. And I think in the resource pack, I've put in somebody called Susan Kane, who has done a TED talk and written books about quiet people. And quiet people are observing, they're looking, but she doesn't like the word introvert. And they need to step forward and they need to say what they're thinking. And then it's okay for them to step back. So if you've got your why and you're somebody who doesn't like being loud, then it's possible to work out with confidence when to step forward.
Yeah, I think confidence is important. I say imagination is very important. I don't know what the hierarchy is, but I'd put it at the top in terms of in the top bucket of important things. It depends what you want to do. If you want to, create things that haven't been done or in ways that haven't been done, you definitely need imagination because there's a lot that's around us that has already been done. So a classic example is planes. We take it for granted that you can go on a plane and go anywhere you want. For a price. But at one point, that was an impossibility. But some people had this imagination, the Wright brothers, that people could fly. And they had that with the confidence, with the resilience to sort of go through the failures to the point where now we can take it for granted, and we don't have to have imagination about planes, but you might have an idea that you don't see around, and but you have it in your mind. So your imagination will kind of help drive you to make that thing a reality if you have the confidence and again all the other things, the resilience. So I'd say it's very important, and along with confidence can take you to some interesting places.
A small little metaphor. I've been working with people in customer services, and good customer services needs to really connect with the customer, but you need the imagination to go left field, because each customer is different. So everybody that you interact with, there is that imagination, whatever role you want to go into at whatever level, around how do we think about this differently? How do we take it? And I quite often do an exercise where we go into observer position, where you do have that imagination around how do we affect change and move this situation so that it works better.
Yeah, so that leads me on to the next question, which is anonymous. And it's, does it matter if I'm a creative person or not?
Oh, that's a good one. I had a family member ask this over Christmas, and we were talking about this, and I said to them, because I'm seen as creative within the family, and someone asked like, what if you're not creative? So it's like, does it matter? And I said to them that, and again, it kind of depends what you want to do, but sometimes we have the perception of creativity, and that's another reason why I do what I do in terms of like challenging conception. So I think we have this idea of creativity of like the creative person, and they're just like free, and they're just living life, and they're just going wherever, doing whatever, whenever. But if you think about like creativity and creative businesses, because ultimately everyone wants to, or if you're doing something creative, you still want to make a living doing something creative, whatever it might be. And if you think about creative business, it's still a business, so it still needs, yes, you need the imagination, and in our case, someone to come up with the stories and the characters and the event experiences and all that. But you still need someone to do the accounting. You still need someone to do the structure of like the planning for the days. So you'll find that the best combination, I feel, is that creativity with the structure in a sense. And Sarah mentioned, like, use the example of Apple, and Apple started with Steve Jobs and a guy called Steve Wozniak. And Steve Jobs, who gets most of the attention because he was the creative one, at least the one at the front. But Steve Wozniak was the one, the tech guy, if you will, making all the changes, and Steve Jobs would sell it. So his imagination was, what do people need and how do we get it to them? But he still needed the actual tech guy who can implement the creative ideas. So my thing is like, the best thing is the combination, because you go too far in one direction, you will lose something. But if you can combine the two effectively, then that's the place to be.
I would just say to that person, who's defining creativity? Because I work with somebody who had come from a non-creative background for many years and didn't feel they were creative and didn't want to touch the creative, which he was paying for. And then I pointed out that he and I had better thoughts about something, and that why didn't he just get his pen out and do a 2-pager? And he came up with something brilliant. And I went, well, my opinion is that you understand, you know what you're talking about, but you've defined in your head that you're not creative. I can switch, because I do both, like Nigel, and I go to things where people think I'm not creative at all. And I was in a room once and somebody said, we haven't got anybody creative left in the room, and the other half of the room swung around to me and looked at me, and I'd done many items on TV of creative work, and it's how people perceive you. And I wonder whether that's questions coming from how that person's perceiving creativity and how the people around them are defining that for them. Because you can be a creative doctor, you can be a creative salesperson, customer services. We've all had them on the line where they've not been creative in how they talk to us, and when they have, and they've been, very reactive and creative in their thinking.
Yeah, very interesting. A couple more questions then. This last one it's got a couple of parts to it. It has come in anonymously, and it's I'm struggling to find out my why. How do I figure it out on my own? And then if I do figure it out, what do I do if my why changes?
I'd say your why will change as you move on. It might not change dramatically, like I love people, unless something happens so you don't look. That core, I would go up above what society's telling you is not about your career. It's about that essence of what you enjoy doing. And so whether it's storytelling, it's helping people, it's going into STEM in order to do something that does something, you can work that out. How do you do it? Don't just watch the Simon Sinek video that Charlie will send you, but there's another video which is quite fun, which is by somebody called Michael J. Comedy, which is a very short video that is done in the middle of a comedy show, but he demonstrates the why using an audience member. And when I've taken it into schools, they love it because they really then understand why, when somebody understands what makes them tick, how they can shift immediately. In terms of how to do it, I would find somebody you like and do the exercise with them and get them to keep asking you. So when I'm doing why, I go, so why? Why do you think that's a good thing? What does that do for you? You know, what would happen if you, I'm trying to think of something that if you took up a sport, you love sports, you love going out and doing things. I work with a lot of people that have done sports and then taken it into the boardroom, and we use that breathing and that energy that they have, that focus that they have, because they can take one into the other. So just talk to people and remember who you are, wherever you are, whether you're in a job that isn't quite firing you up and you're doing that for a purpose in order to get nearer to where you want to be. Enjoy yourselves. And the other thing is being curious.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. Definitely, it will change and evolve as you go. And then I think particularly where you all are at this stage in life is like you can try a lot of things, like sort of hobbies and after school things, and find the things that you like and the things you don't like, because that's also important to know, like this doesn't fire me up. So you'll try different things. It could be sports activities, whatever it might be. It could be talking to people, and be mindful of, like, does this energize me? Does this excite me? Do people question how I can be so good at this, or whatever it might be? And make a note as you go, and just think about, what did I do this week that actually excited me? And I think as you go, you'll realize you'll essentially leave a trail of things that, okay, this kind of thing excites me, this kind of thing I'm good at. What's the connection between them? And then it will come out. At least that's sort of what I tried to work out for myself.
I think on the sheet that you're going to get given, we've got quite a lot of confidence examples in there, and quite a lot is about being able to just get your center. And I could talk more, and we can't see you, which is frustrating. We can't actually engage with person, because I'm sure that if you look at the resources, you look at how you feel, who you are, get that. There's things about breathing, there's things about presence, because you might have to go and ask people and have that presence to go and talk to them. Talked about language patterns, but also there's a colleague of mine, Caroline, she talks about your North Star. If you know where you're heading, it's much easier if you know the path that you're on. And there's a really interesting video about a crisis that happened in Chile by somebody. She did a TED talk again, which looks a bit bizarre looking at it here, how to turn a group of strangers into a team. And it was because they all had the why. They weren't looking at their ego. They all came together and they did the impossible. So that's quite an interesting one. To look at whatever you're doing within a team. You might be somebody who you're going, what can I do? And I always go, the receptionist or the person that cleans up at the beginning and end of a day in an office is often the person that lifts the whole office up. They're the most important people. That's what I was taught my first job, most important people in the office are the people that give it the energy. So your why can be anything. Going back to the question, it doesn't need to be huge to start with. As what you'll find is you shift it and it moves as you grow and develop and have opportunities, but there will be something at the center that will stay the same.
Okay, thank you both. We are at the end of our time today. So before we go, and as we say goodbye, do you have any kind of final thoughts that you'd each like to give today, before we end today's session?
Yeah, I'd say there's a quote that comes to mind sometimes when I speak to young people. I think it applies to anyone, but it's this idea of just starting, and this idea that you don't have to be great to start, but to be great, you have to get started. And I think that's such an important thing, because often I've had it, for sure I've had it, and I've seen people have it where it's hard. That oftentimes getting started is the hardest part, because you can hold yourself back. But it is really like you just get started. And like I said, I can't stress to you how bad those t-shirts were at the beginning. They were very, very bad, but we got started, and no one will ever know, apart from you, because I just told you, but no one will ever know. So yeah.
And I would just say, follow your path and be strong. And if you have a blip, look at the amount of famous people who've had blips. You know, J.K. Rowling, Richard Branson, everybody that's made it, in inverted commas, have normally had jobs that have been nothing to do. You know, they've worked on the shop floor, they've done whatever. They've made it because they've created a presence around themselves, and then they've forged their own path. They haven't been given it. So everything is figure outable, and control the controllables.
Thank you both for joining us. It's been so wonderful having you on, and a really great session. So thank you.